We could all use a brush up on bail reform right now, I think. Remember, before the reforms in 2019, thousands of people accused of a crime would sit in jail for months before they even had a trial, just because they couldn't afford to post bail. The wealthy went free before their trial date. The poor sat in jail. So much for innocent until proven guilty. Bail reform changed that. The default was to let people free before their court date. But critics said that went too far, and dangerous people were left on their own. Hence, the reforms of the bail reforms. We have the lowdown on the latest bail changes on today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls. And Claxton Hepburn Medical Center, dedicated to providing patient care and regional services to the people of St. Lawrence County. ClaxtonHepburn.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, May 8th. First up, if you have thoughts about how the Adirondack High Peaks should be managed, you can share them tomorrow night in Saranac Lake. The DEC is hosting a public meeting from 5:30 to 8:30 Tuesday evening at the Harrietstown Town Hall. As Emily Russell reports, it's the start of a years-long planning process on how best to manage visitors in the park.
Millions of people visit the Adirondacks each year. But in the last 5 years or so, the popularity of the High Peaks has really surged. Trailheads started filling by 6 a.m., parked cars lined roads for miles. There's been serious trail erosion. So a group of stakeholders released a report in 2021 on the High Peaks. It was a kind of framework for how to promote sustainable recreation in the most popular part of the park. The very first recommendation from the High Peaks Advisory Group was to create a visitor use management plan.
This is something that's long overdue.
That's Michael Barrett, executive director of the Adirondack Mountain Club. ADK owns the land around the park's busiest trailhead, the Adirondack Lodge. Barrett sees a visitor use management plan as a crucial step forward for the High Peaks.
So that we have a comprehensive strategy for managing the millions upon millions of visitors who are coming to the forest preserves each year.
New York State has hired OTAC, a research and planning firm, to put together the High Peaks management plan. At Tuesday's meeting, OTAC and DEC officials will present their goals and timeline for the plan. Then they'll open it up to public comment. Barrett says he's eager for the process to move ahead.
The Adirondack Mountain Club is looking forward to being a robust partner in helping the state collect the data and implement a plan so that folks can enjoy the Adirondacks while at the same time doing what we can to lessen the environmental impacts on the resource.
Barrett says someone from ADK will be at Tuesday's meeting. Other environmental groups will likely be there as well. In a statement, the Adirondack Council said it sees this process as a way to prioritize which High Peaks projects the state should fund and in what order. Things like redesigning trails, building bigger parking lots, maybe a better advertisement strategy for the hiker shuttle. Tuesday's public meeting in Saranac Lake is just the start of the process. There will be a second round of public meetings next year. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
The state's budget that was passed last week includes $134 million for funding free school meals for students. WRVO's Ava Pukach reports that New York will reimburse schools participating in the federal Community Eligibility Program.
Schools currently qualify for the program if 40% of their students qualify for free meals. The federal government said it would drop this threshold to 25%. Democratic State Senator John Mannion says the state funding combined with federal government assistance means free school breakfast and lunch will be available to 81% of the state's student population.
It helps kids learn, it helps them succeed, it provides them with the stability that's necessary to be successful in school, and it removes some of the stigma that is involved when we're talking about students in a school setting that are hungry and may not have the funds necessary to purchase breakfast or lunch on that day.
Dan Bowles, superintendent of the North Syracuse Central School District, says students should not have to worry about hunger when they're trying to learn. He noted students were participating in state testing and should be able to focus on their work, not the rumbling of their stomach.
As adults, we recognize that we are not productive when we are hungry, so imagine the impact on a child. Food insecurity is a growing problem, and without the diligence of our local politicians, this would not have become a reality.
The program goes into effect in the fall. In Syracuse, I'm Ava Pugac for North Country Public Radio.
Lawmakers finally approved the new state budget last week. One of the biggest issues that held up the process was further revisions to New York's bail reform laws from 2019. Jonathan Solomon is a reporter for the Albany Times-Union who's been covering this issue. He spoke with Lucy Grindon about what's been changed in the state's bail policy.
Previously or currently, judges have to weigh the least restrictive means to ensure a defendant returns back to court. Instead, it's now the degree of control or restriction necessary to reasonably assure the person's return to court. In legal terms, that's a different standard. That means that judges will have a little more leeway in deciding when to set bail or how much bail to set potentially.
Why are certain criminal justice advocates and lawmakers on the left not happy with these changes?
Those on the left and public defenders view this as a rollback, and they view it as potentially incarcerating more individuals who, generally speaking, especially down in New York City, are Black and brown individuals, potentially holding them in jail pre-trial before they've been accused of anything. They view that as a fundamental rollback of the changes to the state's bail law that they fought very hard for in 2019. Those on the right, especially upstate, view this as not doing enough. They say there needs to be a complete, clear dangerousness standard. And so they view anything short of that as not living up to the need.
So what exactly are Republicans asking for when they say they want a dangerousness standard?
They want what's in other states, where a judge is able to say, I'm going to hold this individual in jail because I think you are a threat to public safety.
And in theory, that would give judges a little more discretion to be subjective about whether an individual is a threat?
Correct. And progressives are worried that would bring in race, that would bring in ethnicity and a discriminatory practice. And what the governor's office is trying to do with these set of variables is limit the amount of discretion or prejudice a judge could bring when deciding whether someone is quote unquote dangerous by instead saying, here are exact factors that we're going to consider, instead of making up what we may consider dangerous. One piece here that's a little less talked about is that they've said, if you were accused of a felony, you were then released by the judge following your arraignment, and then you were arrested again on another felony, the judge now has substantially greater ability that when that defendant comes back after being accused now of 2 felonies, regardless of whether they are quote unquote eligible for bail, the judge can set bail, the judge can remand that individual.
So you're saying if it's the second felony that person has been arrested for, then the judge can set bail or remand that individual even if the second felony or the first felony was not one of the more serious ones?
Yes, a judge can now do that. This is a clear signal to judges on what the legislature wants them to do on felony repeat offenses.
What are some examples of nonviolent felonies where this is a relevant change?
The best one to think about is burglary. It's not an armed robbery. It's not violent, but it is a felony. And burglaries have gone up. And this is an issue folks are worried about.
Have we gone back to the way it was before the 2019 bail reforms, or are things still pretty different from how it was before 2019?
It's still different. It's different for both eligible offenses and non-eligible offenses. And the biggest difference for these quote unquote eligible serious crimes is that judges have to consider a list of variables that progressives would call a dangerousness standard, and moderates and Republicans would say are just a random list of things that a judge could consider on whether or not someone has committed a crime before or possesses a gun or something of that nature.
That was Jonathan Solomon, reporter at the Albany Times-Union, speaking with Lucy Grindon. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by the Saranac Project of Saranac Lake and David Archibald of Kingston, Ontario. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.